Welcome to the Hoosier Gridiron Report, episode 15 this morning with state championship matchups set across the state. This is presented by IndianaHighSchoolSports.com in conjunction with Tom Wood Nissan, as always, just east of Keystone off 96th Street, across from Wawa. There's 0% APR for 60 months on 2025 Nissan Pathfinders and Muranos, 1.9% APR for 60 months on 2026 Nissan Rogues and 2025 Frontiers. Visit Tom Wood Nissan on 96th Street or at tomwoodnissan.com. I'm your host, Mitch Stevens, excited to bring you the second to last episode of the season of the Hoosier Gridiron Report with all the state championship matchups set. So this is the show that will typically bring you a game of the week recap from the previous Friday night, as well as conversations with coaches and analysts around the state every week. For this morning, we are going to have our first ever recurring guest in IndianaHighSchoolSports.com voice, Brad Huber. We're going to talk about the upcoming matchups, the semi-state results from Friday, and one game on Saturday with Cascade getting the victory in the Saturday night matchup here. And we're going to talk about some of the picks that we made in the middle of the season and how those are looking right now. And we have a lot of fun stuff to discuss going into, one of the best times of the year in Indiana high school football, with Thanksgiving week right around the corner, literally starting tomorrow. Thanksgiving weekend with the state championship matchups being played at Lucas Oil Stadium. Before we welcome Brad on, I'd like to invite you to visit IndianaHighSchoolSports.com on your weekends for live streams of big games, recaps from around the state. Of course, the live stream of the show you're watching right now can be found there too. This site, IndianaHighSchoolSports.com, began in 2020. It's continued to grow with 3 broadcasting crews covering Indianapolis and Muncie. If you can't get enough of Indiana high school sports, bookmark that site for your Friday and Saturday nights in the fall and headed into the winter as well, because we have basketball season right around the corner, and we'll have first broadcast starting December 5th for matchups around the state for basketball as well. So we'll have Brad joining us here in just a moment. As has been the case for the past couple of episodes, we have a little bit of technical difficulties going on with Zoom, so we'll be patient with that as Brad gets ready to join us and give his thoughts. But it has been an incredible season in Indiana high school football. We're going to go down the scores from semi-state matchups, and the interesting thing here, one of my partners, Steve Ulrey, who's done multiple games with me now. Steve is the play-by-play guy, and me doing the color. We kind of joked that we were cursed and that we weren't getting any close games at all. And it turns out that's just been the case throughout the state. And we have Brad joining us right now, so we'll let him in and hopefully be smooth sailing from there. Brad, are you able to hear me? All right. I think we got you, Brad.
Hey.
Yep, I can hear you there. Okay, perfect. So welcome. Thanks for being the first ever recurring guest on the show here, Brad.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for having me. Some issues with technology, but good to be with you here this morning here as we get ready for state championship games. Hard to believe we're at the state championship level of football already.
Yeah, it flies by every year, and yeah, some exciting matchups that are coming up. Before I let you in, was just talking about how Steve Ulrey and I have done multiple playoff games now together, and we kind of joked that we were cursed and we had not seen a competitive game, and every new week we were thinking, oh, this is going to be the one. Shatard and Ron Colley, right? It's Shatard kind of handled them in the regular season, but Roncalli's playing great. I think it'll be a close game. Nope, Roncalli whooped him. Right, and then we went to the Lapel and Lutheran game. Oh, Lapel got killed by Lutheran last year, but they're much better. This should be a good game. lapel turned that game into a running clock situation. So anyway, the reason I bring that up is we were thinking, oh, we haven't got any of the close games, but that's really been a theme. The average margin of victory for the semi-state matchups was 24 and a half points. So a lot of blowouts, but what surprised you or kind of jumps out the most about the way these semi-state games went?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. There were a lot of blowouts in the semi-state championship games this past week. Um, There are a couple of close ones as well as I try to find the scoreboard, but last night was one of the close ones. Cascade beat Gibson Southern 49-34 to win the
Yep.
southern part of 3A. It's their first ever appearance in the state championship game. They're one of two teams that are making their debut in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. Brownstown Central in 2A being the other. So good to see some couple of teams with fresh blood coming to the state championship games.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, Cascade a big time win and saw some video from that. And it's why you love high school football. They had to bring out extra stands, and that place was packed across the board. It looked like a school that was hopeful that they were going to get to their first state championship, and they delivered. Cadets are still undefeated. So we'll get to those guys. My only correct pick, by the way, that is still standing as I looked at some of our mid-season picks. But let's go through some of these scores and how it went. We'll go class by class. So in Class A, Pioneer knocked off South Adams 31-14, and they will get South Putnam in the state championship, who defeated Milan 40-7. So two blowouts in Class A. Now we'll go, if we look at this matchup with Pioneer and South Putnam. So Pioneer 13-1, South Putnam 12-2, and Pioneer's only loss on the season was 30-28 to 3A Knox, and Knox just ended up losing in the semi-state, but a heck of a football team with almost the leading rusher in the history of high school football in Miles McLaughlin. He came up short of Derrick Henry's record. So that's the only team that Pioneer lost to by 2 points. And they have wins of 19, 18, and 17. 17 was their closest margin of victory in semi-state against South Adams. So they're rolling, and they have been all year. South Putnam, on the other hand, they're 12-2. Their only losses were to larger schools as well, 3A Edgewood and 4A Northview. What do you see for this game at an 11 a.m. start for a state championship game on Friday?
Yeah, happy Black Friday morning between
Yeah.
these two teams. But I mean, two top five teams. Pioneer ranked number 3 in the state. South Putnam ranked number 5. Pioneer's got a little bit more in terms of experience for the state championship games. They've won the state championship 3 times, the last coming back in 2018. I believe they won in 2017 as well. South Putnam, they have not won a state championship in 39 years. 1986 was the last time South Putnam won a state championship. So, yeah, two very equal ball clubs coming into this ball game, and I expect this is going to start state championship weekend out with a bang. I expect this one to be awfully close all the way throughout the ball game.
Yeah, I think this will be a competitive one as well. I've said that before, though, here in my first year covering Indiana high school football, and been severely wrong. So we'll see. Hopefully, a good one for the fans on Friday morning. Now, we're going to get to the 2A matchup, which is Andrean and Brownstown Central. That game is being played on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. So before we even get into these two teams with Andrean and Brownstown Central, what do you think goes into that preparation for these teams? You play pretty much every game. Maybe there's a homecoming or a senior night situation where it's a little bit pushed back, but you're playing every game 7 p.m. and then you got a 10 or 11 a.m. start. Does that change anything, or are these guys so amped up it doesn't matter, you think?
I think these guys are so amped up. I'm not sure it's really going to matter a whole
Yeah.
lot. Andrew, they haven't been back to state since 2022. They're a three-time state champion. Last coming in 2021 at the 2A level. Before that, twice in the 3A level in 2013, 2004. And then obviously Brownstown Central, they are going to be pumped up, ready to go because they've never been here before. So they don't really know what to expect. Reed May, 326 and 65 in his 33rd year at Brownstown Central, finally getting that team over the hump to get to the state championship game. So, no doubt he'll have his kids ready to go. No question on whatever they were going to play, they were going to be ready to go.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And obviously they'll be ready. It's everything, right? It's the only goal that every team sets out for. It's just an interesting concept for me that, having that game that early in the morning for those guys. Now, we're gonna get to, Brownstown Central as I'm looking at their schedule throughout this year. We're going to get to New Palestine here in a moment, but that's who it reminds me of and just how dominant these guys were. The Braves beat their opponents at, they average of 54.8 to 11. Uh, just rolling through teams. And then they had a really tough semi-state game, winning over Lapel 31-21. Lapel is a team that just never dies. So in that game, it was 24-21. They had them, I think, 4th and 5 with 2-3 minutes to go in the game, and ended up converting a huge touchdown. So that was their biggest test. So this Brownstown Central team with Coach Reed May, they dominated pretty much every game, but probably good to have that battle tested, gotta have it situation in semi-state where it was a little closer, no?
No question. It's not just that they kind of beat up on teams that they played. I mean, they played schools that were much bigger than them too, winning 56-0 at New Albany, winning 59-13 at Seymour. Both of those are 5A schools, beating 4A Silver Creek 63-14, 70-25 at 4A Charlestown, who's in their conference. So not only were they beating up teams, but they were beating up schools that were much larger than them. So that really says something with how good this Brownstown Central Brave football team is.
Absolutely. And yeah, as I'm looking at it here, their win at Scottsburg all the way back on October 17th. That's a 3A Scottsburg team, so a little bit of a bigger school as well. That was their closest margin of victory until semi-state, and it was a 20 point win. So that's going to be a tough matchup for Andrean, who comes in. Also, you get to the state championship. Obviously, all these teams had outstanding seasons. But for Andrean, the Fighting 59ers, let me start with that here, Brad. Do you know what a 59er is?
Um, when you think of 49ers out in California, it's
Right.
to do with the gold rush. So, obviously, it's got to be something historical related there
Yeah.
that happened in 1959, 1859, something like that. I did hear something they may have been founded in 1959, so that may have had something to do with it.
Okay.
But I'm just kind of thinking that I heard that from Paul Condry last night, but don't hold me
Oh,
to.
okay. Yeah, nice. This is I guess podcast host 101. Just a great job on my end. I didn't do any research and didn't know and just asked you, and neither of us know. So anyway, we'll move on from that. I just thought I was like the Fighting 59ers. Huh? I haven't heard that one. Anyway, these guys 12-1. Their loss was to a 5A, right? It's a 2A school. They lost to a 5A Maryville team that will be playing New Palestine for the state championship. Got beat pretty handily, but I mean, that's a mismatch, right? They were major underdogs going into that game. It's interesting, their season, and obviously your team gets way better throughout the year and looks a lot different typically than it did in the beginning. But weeks 1 and 2, they played Maryville, who's in the state championship, and they played Fort Wayne Lures, who we'll talk about next, who's in the 3A state championship. They beat Lures 13-0. So, and there's multiple other impressive wins here on this schedule. And for Andrean, I think it's they played in more close games than or closer than Brownstown Central, but defensively, they gave up 12 points per game. They have given up 12 points per game all season, 41 to Maryville week one. So that number is a lot smaller as you look at some of the teams that are, some of the schools that are more in their size.
Yeah. Just to go back to 59ers, one good thing about the internet, I can confirm that's when Andrean was founded, was in 1959. So that's where that came from. But yeah, you're right. Gave it 41 to Maryville, who'll be playing for the 5A state championship on Friday night at Lucas Oil Stadium. But other than that, what they've given up the most they gave up was the Southmont in that regional championship game with 32 points. Only 5 times this year out of the 13 games they played have they given up double-digit points. So, it's going to be interesting. And Gran, both these teams are obviously very, very good defensively. Brownstown Central scores more than Andrean does. That could be due to the competition. Who knows? So it'll be interesting to see kind of who comes out on the better end of that offensively with two very, very good defensive teams.
Yeah, last note on this matchup, it really is going to be, strength on strength with the Braves offense and Andrean's defense. So we just mentioned 12 points a game allowed for that Andrean defense, with one game with 41 in there. Brownstown Central scored over 50 points 10 times this season. They also had a 48-0 victory in there. So it's going to be a tall task for sure for the defense of Andrean, but should be a great matchup. Let's move into 3A. So Fort Wayne Lures and Cascade. So we touched on this with Cascade, outstanding season, undefeated for Lures. They're coming off of a 35-0 victory against Knox, where really it seemed like on my end anyway, all of the talk going into the game, probably rightfully so, was Miles McLaughlin for Knox. I think he needed to have an incredible game, which he had plenty of those in his career. But I think he needed maybe 300 something rushing yards to beat Derrick Henry, right?
Yeah.
Which is a number that if you follow the NFL, his high school numbers are brought up all the time, and just how outrageous. So congratulations, by the way, to Knox on a great season, and to Miles McLaughlin, but pretty impressive for Fort Wayne Lures on the defensive side. They held him to under 100 rushing yards in a 35-0 drubbing.
Yeah, and he was 250 yards shy of
250.
Derrick
Okay.
Henry's mark, which, if they got the win last night and maybe got points on the board, he could have eclipsed that mark next week in Indianapolis. But yeah, great career for him. Hard to believe his only Division I FBS offer came this week to Ball State. So you would think a lot more schools and teams would be wanting him in running back. So we'll see what happens with him in the future. But you're right. Yeah, Fort Wayne Lures, they got to a very tough start this year, only scoring one touchdown in their first 3 games combined. And that was at Leo in a 14-7 loss in week one. It got shut out to Andrean, who, we just talked about playing for the 2A state championship. Fort Wayne Snyder, a 6A school, beat them 9-0. And then they kind of got things going, winning against Fort Wayne South, double overtime, Fort Wayne North, a big shutout win over Concordia. And so after that first 3 weeks, they really got things going, averaging 20.7 points offensively, 13 points defensively. So, this is a case of one of those teams that's really getting hot at the right time, even losing their regular season finale to Carroll Fort Wayne 35-10. They were able to flip the switch and make this run all the way to state.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And for Coach Kyle Lindsay, as you mentioned, the tough start, they win that game. Let's see, week 5 against Fort Wayne North, a 5A Fort Wayne North, 31-28 in double overtime. So they were dangerously close to starting this season 1-4. And here they are playing for a state championship. And I think what they really have going for them is, you mentioned they got hot at the right time. They're playing their best football right now. But if you look at Kyle Lindsay with Lures, he's won a state title. That was 2 years ago in 2023. Last year, they were 10-5 overall, but they made it to the state title. And you look back 2020, they were 8-7, made it to the state title. So he really just seems to have a knack for having his guys playing their best ball at the end of the year.
Yeah, and that loss last year in the state championship was to Heritage Hills, who was moved up to 4A this year and made the run all the way to semi-state, losing to Roncalli. I know we'll talk about them here in a minute. So,
Yep.
yeah, similar like seasons, I feel like, for Fort Wayne Lures
Mhm.
and Coach Kyle Lindsay. As you mentioned, the same amount of wins and losses as they did last year. So, it'll be interesting to see what they can do against Cascade. No doubt Fort Wayne Lures has the experience at the state championship game against a team, Cascade, who does not, who's never been there before. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out on Friday afternoon.
Yep, Friday afternoon matchup, as you said, with Cascade and Fort Wayne Lures. Let's get to Cascade. 14-0. They're having a magical season in Connor Simmons' 6th year. And a different story for these guys. No slow start, not anywhere close to struggling offensively. They're averaging almost 55 points per game. So when you look at Cascade, they've played, let's see, 2 close-ish games. One that was, in that regional at Lawrenceburg, was probably their toughest battle, winning that 37-33. Fort Wayne Lures, you got to think that they're wanting to kind of muck it up, so to speak. And if this can be 21-17, right, or like a 24-20, that probably plays in the favor of Fort Wayne Lures, where Cascade's going to want to be, throwing it up and down the field.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you look at one of their games, they almost, this is unheard of in high school football, they almost eclipsed the 100 mark
Right.
at Greencastle back on October 3rd with 98 points. I don't know for sure, but that's got to be some sort of record as far as points scored in a football game is concerned. But yeah, you're right. I mean, 54, almost 55 points a game that they score. So this is going to be a very tough task for Fort Wayne Lures to try to defend this Cascade offense, as they love, as you mentioned, to move the football up and down the field. And Lures is going to need to find a way to slow them down.
Yeah, 98 points is ridiculous. Anyone that follows Indiana high school football at all, when you get up by 35 points, that the running clock makes the game fly. So you got to be scoring on every play basically to get up by 35 and somehow get to that. They also had another game where it was no 98, but a 77-0 victory. So this is a team that can score, to state the obvious. So let's get to the 4A matchup now. It is Roncalli and Fort Wayne Dwenger, and we had the Roncalli Chittard game on IndianaHighSchoolSports.com. And I mean, that was, several rounds before the state championship, of course, but thoroughly impressed with Roncalli, with their senior quarterback, Colin Ash. He's an absolute stud. They run the ball well. They play great defense. Just a really tough team. They went into Chittard against their rival, a team that beat them by 22 in the regular season. And really, they beat them 26-6. And it was one of those situations where I don't think the scoreboard really even indicated how bad it was and how dominant this Roncalli team was. So very impressed with them. And what stood out to you about their run, Brad, and kind of playing their best ball toward the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, another one of those situations where they started 7 games into the regular season and they were 4-3. So above 500, but not real dominant. But yeah, starting with that 57-20 win up against Harrison West Lafayette back on October the 10th, and then closing out the win over East Central, who's always really, really good. And then, to run Northview, Danville, Chittard, Yorktown, Heritage Hills, who played for a state championship last year at the 3A level. So another one of those examples by Roncalli, who, if you've been around Indianapolis and Indiana for a while. This is a team that you're kind of used to seeing playing on Thanksgiving weekend. It's been a few years now, 2020 from their last appearance at the state championship, but one of those juggernauts in and blue bloods in the state of Indiana. So good to see them back to Lucas Oil Stadium. I produced Indiana Sports Talk last night. We had the voice of the Colts, Matt Taylor, on the show. He's a Roncalli grad and got to play in two state championship games for Roncalli, winning both. So good to see it used to be the Rebels, now the Royals in the state championship here for Roncalli.
Yeah, and a rematch from week one, which is really fun to see. So for Fort Wayne Dwenger, they lost at Roncalli on August 22nd, 3-0, right? You don't see that very often. I would imagine there's going to be a little more scoring, right? I'll go out on a limb and say that there might be a touchdown in this game. But that's the game that the Saints really like to play. Well, again, I keep going back to my thoughts on New Pal, which we're getting to next, just because their statistics as a team have been so incredible this season. But another one that stands out with Dwenger, 8 points a game they're giving up, right? So they lost two games. One was to a 6A Fort Wayne Northrop, 21-18, and the other one was that lost to Roncalli 3-0. So this is most likely going to be a dogfight and a low scoring game.
Yeah, this could be a very quick ball game at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday. I'm producing all of the even championship games on the network for the Champions Network. So I'll be producing all of those. So it'll be interesting to see if you're right, if there are any points that will be scored touchdowns here in this ball game. Dwinger's looking to try to bounce back and repay Roncalli for their season opening loss to start the year. So it'll be interesting to see. But you mentioned, it's Dwenger has only given up 8 points a game this season. That's really unheard of. Only, as I try to count, 1, 2, 3, 4 times this year have they given up double-digit points. So very interesting to see Roncalli's offense, which averages 33 points a game, against Dwenger's defense, which only averages 8 points a game. Be interesting to see who comes out on top.
As an aside, when we were prepping for that Roncalli Chittard game in the regular season, Roncalli ended up losing that game by 3 touchdowns to Chittard. They started the game with a 9-minute, 19-play drive in which they finished it with a field goal. That's hard to do, to have the ball for 9 minutes and not punch it in. But that's the type of game that Roncalli likes to play as well, although the numbers aren't as low as you see on average for Fort Wayne Dwenger. They like to run the ball and control the clock. So look for that more. One of two rematches that we'll have. We'll get to that very exciting 6A state championship. It's the rematch of the state championship and of a regular season game. Before we do that, we'll talk 5A, and it's New Palestine against Maryville. Thoughts on this game, Brad?
It's going to be really hard to stop this New Pal football team, to be quite honest with you. They have been absolutely rolling, scoring 45.5 points a game. And, we thought the 8 points was impressive. How about 4.6? That New Pal has just given up on average this year just twice in double digits, 10 points to Yorktown, 15 to Cathedral. So there's no question that New Pal is going to be heavily favored Friday night. Maryville, they are going to have their work cut out for them for sure. And just having to find a way to stop this New Pal offense. I saw New Pal back on week 2 against Decatur Central. And, Decatur Central was without their starting quarterback, Bo Poston. But, New Pal was just very impressive offensively. And, it's good for Maryville to get back there, but I have a hard time seeing that they'll stay in this ballgame with New Pal, but we'll see.
Yeah, and you'd like to think so. For Maryville, obviously they've had an outstanding season, and they've now rattled off 10 wins in a row. They're scoring 37 points a game, so you'd think, well, hey, I know New Pal's defense is great, but this is a really good Maryville offense. So far, it has not mattered, right, who New
Yeah.
Pal is playing. Bloomington South was coming in or came into that semi-state matchup last week, averaging over 40 points a game, and New Pal shut them out. East Central, the game before, came in averaging over 35 points a game. They managed six. Cathedral was the standout offensive performance with 15 points, and by far played New Palace, and that's kind of what we thought going into the year. And a lot of people were saying, "Hey, in 5A, New Palestine Cathedral, that's basically going to be the state championship game," and it feels that way. But Maryville, anything can happen. And that's why they play the games, right? They get a shot at them, and I'm sure that those guys will be hearing that all week that you have no chance. You're not going to score any points on these guys. So it'll be interesting to see if they can give them a fight. But yeah, 4.6 points per game is nothing to scoff at.
And, I've seen several of these state championship games where, you have a team from Central Indiana play a team from Northern Indiana. And normally the team from Central Indiana kind of runs away from a team against Northern Indiana. Nothing against those teams. It's just kind of quality of competition that you have in those parts of the state. I remember Carmel running away from Penn one time in the state championship when the de facto state championship was a sectional final against Warren Central. So, just kind of how that falls, it always kind of sides towards the team from Central Indiana just because of the quality of competition, more so here locally than it is kind of in other parts of the state.
Sure, sure. And before we move into the 6A matchup, just wanted to shout out head coach Kyle Ralph of this New Palestine program. So he took this job in 2013. And so for Kyle Ralph, this is his 13th season. New Pal has lost 14 games since he started. 154 and 14. It's hard to believe that you can be that consistently dominant. He's looking for now his fifth state championship victory, and this would be his third in Class 5A. So two of his first one back in 2014 and a 15-0 season was in 4A, and last year state championship in 4A as well. So New Pal is a freight train. They're going to be tough to stop.
Yeah, no question. Maryville, I hope they can come in and give New Pal a game. They are going to need to have the game of their life on both sides of the football, probably a near perfect game to stay in it with New Pal. But, that's why you play the game. Games aren't one on paper, they're one on the field. And, New Pal heavily, heavily favored, but you never know. And that's why we play the game. And be interesting to see what happens to wrap things up on Friday.
We will wrap up today's episode with talking about the 6A matchup for the ages here with Westfield and Brownsburg. And we'll also review to wrap up our picks, hold ourselves accountable a little bit there. But it's Westfield and Brownsburg. This was the matchup in the state championship last year, and the Brownsburg won the state championship 22-17, so a really close game. And this year, Westfield played Brownsburg the closest of any of their opponents by far. So that game, by the time they kick off Saturday night at 7 p.m., it was 2 months ago, but it was a 14-10 narrow victory for Brownsburg. Westfield's been extremely impressive, Brad. Thoughts going into this game?
Yeah, Josh Miracle now 2 for 2 in state championship appearances in his second year as Westfield Shamrock, replacing Jake Gilbert, who's now the head coach for Wabash College. Congrats to them on their bowl victory yesterday for the Wabash Little Giants. But yeah, Josh Miracle off to a really good start as the head coach of Westfield, making it to the state championship now in his first 2 seasons for the Shamrocks. And, they know this Brownsburg team very, very well, having played them, I think, now 4 times in the last 2 years. So, Uh, Brownsburg, no doubt the favorite, but I think Westfield will have a shot to hang with the Bulldogs here in the 6A championship game.
Yeah, and I think with as dominant as Brownsburg has been, this is important, I think, at any level, but particularly when you're talking about, you know, 15 to 18-year-olds, the high school football level, just when you're going up against that giant that everybody thinks should win, the belief, right, that you can hang with them and beat this team is extremely important. And you look at those matchups, just obviously you graduate seniors every year, but a lot of the same guys from these last 2 years. Brownsburg beat Westfield 17 to 13 in the regular season last year, 22 to 17 in the state championship, and then 14 to 10 the regular season this year. So these have been extremely good games, and you would think it's leaning towards that as well. And for Westfield on the other side, really impressive the way that they were able to knock off Carmel at Carmel in an overtime game, because Carmel was really the story with what Kevin Wright had done with that program. And I think a lot of people thought it would be Carmel playing against Brownsburg in this championship game.
Yeah, kind of a Tim Tebow jump pass for Westfield in overtime to knock off my alma mater, the Carmel Greyhounds, there in the sectional championship game back on November the 7th. But going back into your point, 13 points have been the difference between Brownsburg and Westfield since Josh Miracle took over, all one-score games. So you're right. I think it's going to be a very, very tight ball game, but yeah, their win over Carmel at Carmel in that sectional championship in overtime really got this Shamrock team momentum going, and it's really carried them now all the way to Lucas Oil Stadium.
And this will segue perfectly into wrapping up with our points that we scored from our picks. So I had Brad on mid-season, made some picks for state champions in each class. And it segues into it because Brownsburg is one of the teams that I need to lose in order to have any type of chance at this. So Brad leads with 7 points, with New Pal and Brownsburg getting to semi-state and now both finalists in their respective classes. And then another point for Adams Central making it to semi-state. Cascade is carrying me right now. 4 points for me with with 3 points with Cascade, and then I had one more with Lapel making it to semi-state. So essentially, the only path for yours truly to win this little bet would be if Cascade wins their state championship, and then New Pal and Brownsburg losing in the state championship. I don't think I don't think that second part is very likely. Maybe one of those two teams gets upset, but for both of them to lose, we might have to have an emergency podcast that night.
Yeah, no doubt, Brownsburg could. Westfield, they've been knocking on the door. They want to get over that hump and beat Brownsburg for the first time since 2021. So you might have a case there. Now, it would be a massive, massive upset, I think, if Maryville knocked off New Pal in that 5A game. So I feel better about that one than I do really with Brownsburg and Westfield, but we'll see.
Yep. And as we've mentioned a couple times, that is why they play the games. Well, Brad Huber, thank you for joining us on the second to last episode of the year on Hoosier Gridiron Report. And we will look forward to seeing everybody on IndianaHighSchoolSports.com all throughout the basketball season, as well as some pop-up streams throughout the year. But again, Brad, thank you for joining, and everybody definitely tune in on Friday and Saturday, Thanksgiving weekend, for the state championship matchups.
Thank you, Mitch.
Yep. Thanks, Brad.